Let's start by looking clearly at the numbers. In 1990, more than half of American men, around 55%, said they had at least 6 close friends. Fast forward to 2021, and that number has been cut in half. Just 27% of men now say the same. And that's not just a minor drop. That's a collapse. That's the social equivalent of a financial market crash. Only instead of banks failing, it's our human relationships that are defaulting. What's more alarming is not just that men have fewer friends, but that an increasing number of them say they have no close friends at all. In 1990, only 3% of men reported having 0 close confidants. By 2021, that figure had more than quintupled to 15%. That's 1 in 7 men walking around each day without a single person they feel truly close to. Nobody to call when things go wrong. Nobody to celebrate with when things go right. Nobody to say, I get it, I'm here. And this isn't just a dip on a graph. It's a reflection of something deeply troubling happening underneath the surface of modern male life. These aren't just abstract statistics. They represent real lives being lived in quiet isolation. And it's easy to look at these numbers and think, well, maybe men just prefer fewer friends. But that's not what the evidence shows. In survey after survey, men report wanting more connection. They're not choosing solitude. They're sliding into it. You have to ask, what has changed? What's happened in these past few decades that's caused male friendship to fall off a cliff? Part of it is cultural. As society has modernized, we've placed increasing emphasis on romantic love as the primary relationship. There's been a narrowing of emotional support systems where the assumption is that once you're in a committed relationship, especially a heterosexual one, that relationship should now meet all your emotional needs. Your partner is your best friend, your confidant, your sounding board, your therapist, your everything. But that model is deeply flawed. It places too much pressure on romantic relationships, and it crowds out the space where same-gender friendships once thrived. Historically, male friendships had more room to flourish. You can go back just a few generations and find images of men sitting close together on park benches, arms around each other, in photographs, writing letters, filled with tenderness and vulnerability. There was nothing unusual about male intimacy. Not sexual intimacy, but emotional closeness, trust, softness. Somewhere along the way, that changed. As gender roles shifted and traditional masculinity came under scrutiny, we didn't evolve male friendships, we abandoned them. Today, male friendship is often limited to shared activity. Men bond by doing things, watching sports, working out, gaming, fishing, going to the pub. These are good things. There's value in camaraderie, in shoulder-to-shoulder connection. But what often gets lost is the deeper face-to-face emotional connection. The kind where you can talk about real things, fear, grief, uncertainty, dreams, and not feel exposed or ashamed. The kind of connection that goes beyond laughs and small talk and touches on something truer. The kind of connection that sustains us when life gets hard, and life does get hard. Friendships are the invisible scaffolding that holds us up when things fall apart. A job loss, a divorce, a health scare, a child struggling, a parent dying. These are the moments when we need someone who knows us, not just our job title or our LinkedIn profile, but who we are when the mask slips. Yet too many men are facing those moments without that scaffolding. The decline of deep male friendship also intersects with work culture. We've built a society that idolizes productivity and individual achievement, often at the expense of human connection. For many men, the peak years of their careers, 30s, 40s, 50s, are also the years when friendships begin to fade. The demands of work and family crowd out time for social connection. Friendships, once nurtured in adolescence and early adulthood, fall victim to a kind of benign neglect. Will catch up soon, turns into months, then years, and slowly, silently, the connections dissolve. We also have to acknowledge the gender difference here. Women on the whole are better at maintaining friendships over time. They're more likely to check in, to reach out, to schedule time together, even amidst the chaos of daily life. Men often lack those same habits, and the result is a growing emotional isolation that isn't always easy to detect until it becomes acute. And when it does become acute, when the absence of close friendship finally breaks through, It doesn't always look like loneliness. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal or anger or overwork or emotional numbness, or simply a growing sense that something is missing, but we can't quite name what. Of course, technology has a role in all this too. It gives us the illusion of connection without the substance. We can follow hundreds of people, comment on photos, share memes, but none of that necessarily translates into the kind of honest, soul-deep friendship we truly need. In fact, it can make us feel even lonelier as we compare our internal experience to the curated highlight reels of others. The truth is, scrolling is not the same as showing up. Liking a post is not the same as listening to a story. And yet, this is where many friendships now live, on the surface. And there's also a quiet stigma around friendship itself, particularly for adult men. It's rare to see two grown men talking openly about how much they value each other or how much they rely on one another. There's often a performative aloofness, as if saying, I need you or I miss you is somehow unmanly. But that posture of emotional independence isn't strength. It's a survival strategy, one that ultimately leads us weaker, not stronger. And I want to say this clearly. Wanting close friendship is not a sign of failure. It's not something we're supposed to outgrow after college. It is a core human need, and when we don't meet that need, we suffer. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. This is not a small issue. It's a foundational one. If we want healthier men, we need better friendships. If we want stronger families, we need men who aren't relationally isolated. If we want more compassionate communities, we need men who know how to love each other, not just in theory, but in practice. And yes, that includes vulnerability, awkwardness, honesty, care. These aren't luxuries, they're lifelines. So the question isn't whether we need friendship. The question is whether we're willing to reimagine what friendship can look like for men today. Whether we're willing to break through the silence, challenge the stigma, and reclaim connection as a strength. Because if we keep going the way we're going, more men drifting, more friendships fading, the consequences won't just be personal. They'll be cultural. They already are. And the truth is, it doesn't take a grand revolution to reverse the trend. It takes small, intentional steps, a phone call, a walk, a question asked, a moment of honesty, a second invitation when the first one is declined. That's how friendship is built. Not all at once, but over time, with care, with patience, with presence. Right? Because nobody should have to go through life without someone who truly knows them. And nobody should have to carry the weight of the world alone. It's impossible to talk about the friendship recession, especially for men, without confronting something deeper, more ingrained, and frankly, more uncomfortable. And that is the emotional suppression that begins early in boys' lives and continues well into manhood. If we're going to understand why so many men are struggling to maintain meaningful friendships, we have to start with how they were taught to understand themselves. From the youngest ages, boys receive messages, some loud, some subtle, that shape their relationship to emotion. Don't cry, man up, be tough. But these aren't just throwaway phrases. They are lessons, and boys learn them well. By adolescence, many have internalized the idea that vulnerability is dangerous, that talking about how you feel makes you less of a man, that needing support is a sign of weakness. So instead of developing emotional fluency, boys often learn emotional containment. And instead of building friendships rooted in openness and trust, they build relationships based on shared activities, competition, and surface-level banter. That might seem harmless in youth, perhaps even normal, but it carries a cost. Because while those bonds can be fun and full of camaraderie, they rarely create the space for deeper connection. The kind of connection that can hold grief, disappointment, confusion, or fear. And over time, as life becomes more complex and demanding, those shallow connections often fall away, revealing just how little there is to lean on. By the time many men reach adulthood, they've mastered the art of emotional control. They know how to keep a straight face, how to stay composed, how to stay silent. What they don't know often is how to express pain without shame, how to tell a friend, I'm struggling, how to say, I feel lost, or even, I miss you. Because somewhere along the way, those words became coded as unmanly, too soft, too needy, too emotional. And let me be clear, this isn't because men don't have emotions. It's because many have been conditioned to suppress them. And when emotional expression is blocked, emotional connection suffers. You cannot build a deep friendship without some degree of vulnerability. You cannot be known, truly known, without opening up. But for many men, that openness feels threatening. It risks judgment, discomfort, even ridicule. So they choose safety over connection, silence over truth, distance over intimacy. Now, some might say this is just biology, that men are simply less emotional than women, but that doesn't hold up. Boys and girls express similar levels of emotional sensitivity in early childhood. The divergence happens later through socialization, through reward and punishment. A boy who cries too much is teased. A boy who talks about his feelings is seen as odd. A boy who chooses empathy over aggression might be labeled weak. And so over time, many boys adjust. They become more emotionally stoic, more guarded, and crucially, less practiced in the skills that friendships require: honesty, empathy, self-disclosure, listening. What we're seeing now is the long-term result of that emotional narrowing. Men who struggle to form and sustain close friendships, not because they don't want them, but because they were never taught how. Men who crave connection but feel unequipped to seek it, who miss their friends but don't know how to say it, who feel lonely but don't know what to do about it, other than carry on. Again, this isn't about fault, it's about culture. It's about the stories we've told about masculinity, stories that emphasize strength, independence, and dominance while sidelining softness, receptivity, and emotional openness. The truth is, we've made friendship harder for men than it needs to be. We've taken something fundamentally human, the need for close, caring bonds, and wrapped it in gendered expectations that cut men off from themselves and from each other. You can see it in the data. Men are far more likely than women to report having no close friends. And the drop-off is steep. Over the past 30 years, the number of men who say they have no one to confide in has tripled. At the same time, men are more likely to say they rely exclusively on their romantic partner for emotional support, which means that if that relationship ends, whether through divorce, separation, or death, many are left without any emotional scaffolding at all. They fall, and there's nothing to catch them. That fragility isn't just sad, it's dangerous. Because when men suppress emotions for long enough, it doesn't make those emotions disappear, it simply buries them deeper. And what gets buried tends to come out in other ways, through anger, addiction, workaholism, even violence. Or it turns inward, becoming depression, anxiety, and tragically suicide. We see this particularly in men in their 40s and 50s. Men who may look fine on the outside, who may be holding everything together professionally, but who are quietly unraveling inside, unable or unwilling to reach out. So what do we do? How do we change this? It begins first with permission. Men need to know that it's okay to feel, that it's okay to talk, that it's okay to reach out and say, I need someone. We need to deconstruct the idea that emotions are the domain of women, that friendship is secondary, that men should be lone wolves, stoic and self-contained. That model is not only outdated, it's deadly. We also need to model new ways of relating. We need more men to be public about their friendships, about their feelings, about their struggles. We need to see examples of male connection that are rich, affectionate, emotionally expressive, whether that's in media, in schools, in families. We need a cultural reset, because boys don't just learn from what we say, they learn from what we show. If the only emotional men they see are portrayed as weak, broken, or comic relief, they will internalize that message. If instead they see strong men being open, being loving, being kind, they'll internalize that too. And finally, we need to make emotional education a priority, not just for girls, but for boys. We need to teach emotional literacy in schools, at home, in sports, in faith communities. We need to give boys the language to express what they feel, the tools to manage it, the confidence to share it. Because if they don't learn those skills young, they won't magically acquire them at 30 or 50 or 70. The stakes are too high to ignore. Emotionally suppressed men become isolated men. And isolated men become fragile men. And fragile men, left unsupported, can become harmful to themselves, to others, or both. But the good news is, this isn't inevitable. Culture is made and it can be remade. And every act of emotional honesty, every moment of vulnerability, every invitation to deeper friendship, it all counts. It all helps. Because at the end of the day, No man is an island. No one should have to carry the full weight of life alone. And no friendship worth having was ever built without a little emotional courage. And when we talk about connection in the modern world, there's a temptation to assume that more access equals more intimacy. That because we can ping someone in a different time zone, leave a voice note at midnight, or send a meme across continents, we must be more connected than ever. But we know, don't we, that this isn't the case. In fact, there's a strange paradox here. We have more ways to stay in touch than any generation before us. And yet many of us, especially men, are more out of touch than ever, especially on the level that really counts. There's this illusion of closeness that technology gives us. You see someone's photo, you watch their story, maybe you even like it, comment with a flame emoji or a fist bump. And for a moment, it feels like you've interacted, like you've connected. But when you strip that down, when you sit with it, you realize there was no real exchange. There was no vulnerability, no presence, just a kind of digital pat on the back, quick, easy, and entirely forgettable. Tease not that technology is inherently the problem. Of course not. These tools can help us stay in each other's orbit. They can help bridge time zones and schedules. But a bridge isn't a destination, it's a path. And if we never actually cross it, if we never go beyond the surface, then we're mistaking convenience for connection. What's even more complicated is that for many men, these digital interactions have become the primary form of friendship. A few group chats, some memes in the feed, a couple of gaming sessions with the mic on. But there's a crucial distinction to be made here. There's a difference between companionship and communion, between interaction and intimacy. Just because you're talking doesn't mean you're being heard. Just because you're laughing doesn't mean you're being known. For women, friendships tend to lean into the emotional. They talk about relationships, fears, hopes, health. There's an openness, often from a young age, that is socially reinforced. For men, the model is different. We're taught to bond by doing side-by-side activities, sports, projects, games, business, which can be rich in their own way. But often what's missing is the emotional substrate, the space to talk honestly, to be vulnerable, to admit when things are falling apart. And this is where digital connection becomes a double-edged sword, because it gives the illusion of being socially active without requiring the emotional investment. It allows you to feel like you're not alone even when you are. It's safe, it's controlled. And for many men who've been taught that opening up is risky or even weak, this kind of connection feels preferable. But what's missing is the depth, the realness. Let's take gaming, for example. Now, gaming communities are significant. For a lot of men, especially younger men, this is where friendships exist, there's camaraderie, there's teamwork, there's even joy. But often that camaraderie doesn't translate into emotional support when it's needed most. You can play with someone for hundreds of hours and still not know how they're really doing, still not know that they're going through a divorce or grieving a parent or barely getting out of bed in the morning. That's not a failure of gaming. That's a failure of our emotional norms. Because if someone in your life is suffering and you don't know because you've never asked or never felt you could, then there's a missing link. There's an emotional drought masked by the illusion of connection. The same applies to social media. When you scroll through someone's feed, it's easy to believe you're caught up with their life. You saw the birthday photo. You saw the new job update. You saw the vacation snaps. But what you didn't see, what you can't see, are the in-between moments, the doubts, the nights alone, the questions no one's answering. A curated feed is not a full life. And yet, we scroll. And we scroll and we think we're close. In reality, technology often encourages us to perform our lives rather than share them, to present rather than reveal. And the danger here is that men who are already reluctant to open up now have the perfect excuse not to. They can simply perform a version of themselves that looks stable, looks connected, looks happy, even when they're none of those things. And so we have this generation of men, particularly younger men, who are technically more connected than ever, but feel desperately alone because they're communicating but not confiding. They're interacting but not relating. They're showing up online but not showing up emotionally. And that has consequences, not just for their own mental health, but for their capacity to form deep, meaningful bonds as they move through life. You see, friendship isn't built on convenience. It's built on consistency, on discomfort, and the willingness to ask difficult questions and sit with uncomfortable truths. It's not built in the comment section. It's built in the long, sometimes messy conversations that happen in real time, in real life, or at least in real intimacy. That doesn't mean technology has no role. It absolutely can play a supportive part. A group chat can become a lifeline if it's used with intention. A video call can carry immense emotional weight if it goes beyond the surface. Even a text message can be the beginning of something deeper if it leads to actual presence, to genuine care. But it starts with a shift in mindset. We need to move from quantity to quality, from reach to depth, from broadcasting to bonding. And that means taking risks, asking the second question, following up, being the one who says, hey, how are you really? And sticking around for the answer. It also means carving out time, because let's be honest, friendship takes effort. You can't automate it. You can't outsource it. You can't schedule it into 5-minute windows between meetings. You have to give it space. And that's especially true for men, because the cultural momentum is pushing in the other direction, telling them to be efficient, independent, self-sufficient, telling them that if they need others, they're failing somehow. We need to challenge that message. We need to reframe friendship, not as a luxury, but as a form of strength, a protective factor, a cornerstone of well-being. And yes, that might mean pushing through the awkward phase. It might mean being the one who invites, even if you're not sure the invite will be returned. It might mean putting your phone down and showing up in person, in voice, in truth, because no number of likes can substitute for being loved. No amount of followers can replace being known. No beautifully filtered post can take the place of someone sitting across from you saying, I see you, I hear you, I've got you. So the next time you catch yourself thinking you've connected because you scrolled past someone's highlight reel, ask yourself, do I know how they're really doing? Have I reached out? Have I made space for the messy, human, offline version of this relationship? Because that's where friendship lives. Not in the cloud, but in the moments that are real, vulnerable, and shared. And that is where the healing begins. Here we need to be honest about what's really happening beneath the surface of all this. The loss of friendship, particularly for men, isn't just a footnote in the social data. It's a warning light. It tells us something much deeper is breaking down, something essential. And the consequences, if we're willing to look closely, are profound. Because we're not just talking about people feeling a little lonelier than they used to. We're talking about people drifting further and further from the very relationships that make life livable. We're talking about a social infrastructure that's quietly crumbling. And it's costing us, not only emotionally, but physically, economically, generationally. The irony is that we live in the most connected era in human history. In theory, we should be thriving in our relationships. You can send a message across the planet in a second. You can hop on a video call, share photos instantly, join interest groups, track your friends' lives in real time. We have more ways than ever to be in touch, but still, so many feel untouched. That's the paradox of our time. Technology has expanded the surface area of connection, but often at the expense of depth, because being available isn't the same as being present. Clicking a like button doesn't replace shared silence. A comment thread isn't a real conversation. Emojis are not empathy. What we're seeing is that quantity has crowded out quality, and nowhere is that more true than in male friendship. Men are particularly vulnerable to this shift. Many rely on shared activity, watching a game, working out, building something as the foundation of friendship. But when life starts getting busier, when careers take over, when family responsibilities grow, when free time shrinks, that shared activity becomes harder to maintain. And if there wasn't emotional substance underneath, the friendship fades. What's left is a feed, a highlight reel, an illusion of connection. And illusions don't protect you when life gets hard. That's why it's not enough to say, well, I text him now and then, or I still follow what he's up to. We have to ask, can I call this person at 2 a.m. when something goes wrong? Can I tell him the truth when I'm falling apart? Can I trust that he'll show up, even when it's inconvenient? Too often the answer is no. That's the friendship recession in its truest form. Not the absence of people, but the absence of people who matter, of people who know us not just on the surface, but in the hard, unedited spaces of our lives. And the effects of that absence are staggering. Loneliness increases the risk of early death by 26%. It raises the likelihood of depression, anxiety, substance abuse. It's linked to cognitive decline in older age. The health impact is on par with obesity, with smoking, with physical inactivity. But there's another layer to this that's even more alarming, and it's cultural, because the erosion of friendship is creating a generation of men who are disconnected not just from each other, but from society at large. When men feel isolated, they don't just withdraw from friends, they withdraw from participation. They're less likely to engage in civic life, less likely to volunteer, less likely to vote. They're more susceptible to narratives of alienation and resentment, more likely to fall into extremist rabbit holes, more prone to conspiracy, rage, even violence. This is what happens when men lose a sense of belonging. They don't just lose support, they lose direction, they lose accountability, and sometimes they lose themselves. So yes, this is emotional, but it's also structural, it's political, it's economic. It's about who's showing up in communities and who's disappearing. And we can't just treat this as a personal failing. We can't say, well, he should have kept in touch or he just needs to put himself out there more. That ignores the broader forces at play, because the truth is we've made friendship harder to sustain. We've built a world that's optimized for productivity, not proximity. People move more for jobs, commutes are longer, work hours are stretched. Digital communication is fast but shallow, and emotional openness still carries a stigma, especially among men. So when we ask why are friendships dying, we need to look beyond the individual and ask how our systems, our culture, and our expectations are shaping this reality. We often celebrate independence as the highest good. We raise boys to be strong, silent, self-sufficient. And while there's a certain nobility in self-reliance, the problem is when it becomes isolation, when strength becomes silence, when stoicism becomes a mask. The result is men who don't feel permitted to need, who don't feel safe to reach out, who don't know how to say, I miss you, or I'm not okay, or even I need you. And so they don't say it. And then one day they look around and realize they haven't had a real conversation in weeks. We cannot solve this with sentimentality. We solve it with structure, with new habits, with redefined expectations. It starts by treating friendship not as an optional part of adulthood, but as essential, as maintenance for the soul. It's like you wouldn't skip meals for a week and expect to feel fine. You can't go long stretches without meaningful connection and expect to stay whole. That means making time intentionally. That means having conversations that go beyond the surface. That means picking up the phone, following up, asking deeper questions, offering help and accepting it. That means risking awkwardness, because intimacy always involves some risk. Vulnerability always carries the chance of rejection. But the alternative, emotional isolation, is far worse. And it also means reframing how we talk to boys and young men, teaching them early on that being a good friend isn't weakness, that care is masculine.